All right, joining me now, I am delighted to welcome three guests to the studio who are the living embodiment of Kiwi ingenuity. We have Mark Harris from Gallagher's Animal Management Team. Hello, Mark.
G'day, Radar.
We have Craig Mulgrew from Giltrap Engineering.
Radar, how are you?
And joining us from somewhere, where are you, Tony Egan from Greenlee Meats?
I'm hiding in my office.
You
it's
are
great to be here.
It's nice to have you here. Look, today we're talking innovation and technology. I'm going to begin, Mark. You know, Gallagher's is a company built on innovation.
Yeah, it sure is. Like all good stories, it started with a horse. Back in the 20s, Bill Gallagher's senior horse was scratching on the Essex car, and he thought he could find a way to stop that. So he ingeniously wired up the magneto, put one side to ground and one side onto the car, and wound it up with a rubber band, so that when the horse bumped the car, the idea was the rubber band would spin the magneto. And the next day, the rubber band was unwound and the horse was on the other side of the house and never went near the Essex car again. And so that was the invention of a very good idea for electric fencing. And of course, the rest is history, and now Gallagher is the #1 electric fencing company in the world.
Indeed, and you know, and even beyond that, there is so much that Gallagher does that people have no idea about, really. I mean, I've given you guys awards for all kinds of things, including, I think, you know, some leading edge, you know, sort of biometric data entry systems into places, probably more so overseas than in the animal. Don't tend to need to, you know, have a biometric entry for a cow into a paddock.
No, not at this point, but yeah, you're right. The company is really diversified, and we've got quite a successful security business now, which keeps people safe and tracks their movements and lets them in and out of buildings and whatnot. And yeah, there's a lot of biometric sensors and stuff, as you point out, used by that part of our company. But that's really given us strength because we've now got a much broader base of technologies from which both animal management and security can draw technologies from.
Marvellous. What's the start of the Giltrap story?
It was a pretty humble little engineering business on a farm, actually. So it was my father-in-law's business, Wilfred Giltrap. He was the founder back in 1959 and really started out, I think he didn't want to be a farmer, so he thought he'd turn his hand to engineering instead, which was his passion. Built a lot of farm gates and pretty quickly got into the whole bulk handling of products on farms, you know, shifting dirt, figuring out ways to feed animals quickly with one person instead of, you know, chasing them around with a hay bale. So yeah, that's really been the genesis of our business, and is still a big part of our business today.
Right, and that is the thing, you know, you continue to do well. What surprised you the most about that sort of journey?
Probably that we've had to get seriously on board with technology, I think, you know, so people still need to feed animals, but the demand for feeding's got a lot bigger than what it ever used to be. So equipment's got bigger. Data has become a pretty important part of the daily farming life, and we've really had to get pretty smart about building technological systems into what was otherwise a pretty simple bit of equipment.
Yeah. Tony, when it comes to meat and meat processing, I guess there's innovation on both sides, isn't there? There's the innovation in terms of how that meat is processed, and there's innovation in what comes out at the other end, what products people want.
Yeah, absolutely right, T-Radar. And, you know, you think back some decades ago, there was a lot of frozen meat floating around the world. That evolved into cuts, and now we've evolved into a whole range of country-specific specifications, and added value products have become the new norm in meat industry. I think we're up to about 1,200 products. So you're right, wherever you look now, you have to innovate or die. We've got a bit of a saying in our game called lead, follow, or get out of the way. And we've also got neighbours called the Gallaghers up the road, who are a very innovative crowd, and we've got to try and keep up with them, with people like Mark Harris sitting beside you there. So we've got a constant pressure to innovate because we don't want to be the guy that falls off the perch.
That's right. And so in your line of work, how much of that innovation, say, for example, in the meat plants is driven by you, and how much of it is people coming to you with a product that you or they think that you could use?
But it's a combination of both. It's embedded in our culture. It's one of our core values, and we've even got a little card that we carry around with us in the company, which says, innovation, we actively seek new and better ways to do things, to do what we do. We actively seek new opportunities. So we're constantly trying to recognise innovation and reward it where we can with bonus schemes and so forth.
Which is a good way, I suppose, of fostering innovation. And there's a question I'm going to come to each of you around. We pride ourselves on saying we're this nation, you know, that celebrates innovation and we need to be innovative. Tony, how do you find people like that? Is it something that can be taught? Is it ingrained? Is it part of the social structure and the social fabric of the nation, the way we think, the way we're brought up?
Well, it's an interesting observation, to Radar, that during the COVID-19 crisis, we had to innovate quite a lot because we had to work 2 metres apart, and our online sales became incredibly popular. And what I learned, perhaps more than anything, is that the best way to innovate is for old buggers like me to get out of the way and let some of these youngsters have ideas, because the more you let them have ideas, the more they seem to come up with. And so, if anything, I've learned that I'm becoming redundant. I'm a bit of a dinosaur. I've got to let some others have a go.
Well, dinosaurs were important, for a period of time. They ruled the roost. But where do you find innovation? Do people come to you? Do you seek them out? Do you see it seething out of the miasma of the provinces?
Yeah, look, I think as Tony says, I think it comes from everywhere. I think it's intrinsic in our business. So we certainly try and cultivate innovation within our team, and whether that's innovation in a product or innovation in the way that we do something or the way that we present a product to the market and talk to our customers. So yeah, and there's some people in our business that it's their job to innovate. That is their role, much like Mark's role is at Gallagher, I'm sure. But we look for it in everybody, and we get a huge amount of feedback from our customers. And I think it's really important to listen to your customers, because they're the guys that are out there, doing things with a product that we never thought would happen to it.
Quintessentially New Zealand.
Yeah,
yes.
Absolutely. New Zealand's a really good proving ground for agricultural products. And so if they can't break it, that must be okay.
And Mark, I would imagine that ability to listen to customers, some of the simple or the great little innovations may come from someone just overhearing a chance remark that a customer, a farmer, somebody has said, and someone comes back and says, "Look, I've heard this. Maybe we could do something here." Yeah,
that's exactly right. There's a heck of a lot of the things that we do that have come directly from farmers, and we've got a big commitment to R&D as well. We've got 180 people in R&D. They do some pretty amazing stuff, right from we developed a new type of weigh scale that's operated by touchscreen. It's like a tablet, touchscreen tablet. We make things like that in New Zealand that offshore you'd require a team of 10 times the people to do. But right down to that R&D team doesn't just work on those big things. They also work on some things that are quite sort of simple everyday things, like who would have thought you could improve on the old pigtail standard? So we sent some guys out and talked to a number of farmers in New Zealand and offshore, and found out all the pain points that the farmers have with these. The fact that the tube cuts at the top, and the fact that they tangle like a barrel of monkeys. And so once you understand the problems farmers have, then you throw the smart people at it, and they can come up with some really good ideas. And that was how the ring top was born, which is a new standard, a new take on the standard, which has a moulded on head and a moulded on foot, and it doesn't tangle, and the insulation doesn't fail, and it's a brilliant new concept. So yeah, listening to the customers are the source, really, of the problems that we can get smart people to work on.
Now, Tony, what are the customers saying to you? You say you've got 1,200 products coming through. What are customers wanting in terms of innovating? Because you would imagine that we would have figured out pretty much every cut of meat there is, because we've been cutting up meat since almost the time you were born.
Well, that's right, Tirado. The average meat company customer these days wants us to be a fish and chip shop more than a meat company. They want 2 of this and 1 of that, and wrapped in the way they want it, and delivered at a certain time of the day. So we've really got to be more customer-centric, and the industry's doing more of that collectively now. There's a lot more JV-type thinking going on, where you build scale, and so you can take on certain customers that are perhaps bigger or require more diversity, more sophistication. And the other big thing that's become part of our business is innovation around attributes. So we're not just talking about a cut or a packaging, but we're talking about intrinsic things to the quality of what we do in New Zealand, like antibiotic-free, hormone-free, pasture-fed, animal welfare. You know, these things are becoming increasingly part of the story we tell around our products. And so innovation for us isn't just about the physical dimensions of what we do, it's also about the stories and the way we present our products to the world.
Because that transparency and traceability is incredibly important. Are we sort of almost at the opposite end of that spectrum with our transparency versus some of your competitors in the States, where what goes on inside some of their meat systems is virtually closed off from the world?
Well, that's true, Terada. I shared my bubble recently with 3.5 vegetarians, which was a very painful experience for a month, being a meat man. Yeah. But what I learned was the consumers, my own family, have become flexitarians and vegetarians, and are at best very critical of things that don't go well for animals or the world, climate change, for instance. And they want a product that's quality, and they want it in an available form. They don't want something they've got to use a chainsaw to get to. So, you know, the consumer has become much more discerning about things like those attributes, but also about the way animals are raised. And New Zealand, fortunately, has a pasture-based system and has attributes that present our products very well on the world stage at a time when consumers are starting to really question the way we do things. So I think you're absolutely right. You know, whether it's me and my bubble during COVID shutdown or a customer on the other side of the world, we have to look at things in a new way from new perspectives. And, you know, let's face it, these generation Ys and so forth are starting to breed us out, so we've got to start listening to them before they take over.
You should do. I'm actually much more of a flexitarian than I was a few years ago. And I like to say, particularly to the meat farmers, that all of those vegetables that I eat are grown with the same love and the same passion and the same desire for better farming systems as any of the sort of the meat-based products. Hey, look, I'm thinking about R&D. Is R&D at this particular time, obviously it's the lifeblood of your industry, but for a lot of businesses, does it become, in times of crisis, a nice to have? Do they start to sacrifice that a little bit just to keep doing what it is they're doing?
Some may, but our philosophy is quite the opposite. In these times, if you have the capacity or ability to actually up the game, now's the time you can move ahead. So that's the approach we're taking. Be very, very mindful of where you invest and try and get ahead in these times.
And I imagine, Tony, you were mentioning, you know, during the lockdown, that change, I guess, in consumer behaviour. What was the biggest change you had to do in that sort of thing with your R&D people to suddenly think, oh, shivers, here's a problem we need to solve very, very quickly?
Our business development manager realised very early on that our online sales were going to grow by about 500%, and so we commandeered the boardroom. Then they commandeered me, the managing director, and stuck me in there to pack boxes with them because they were running out of hands. And I proved how people do rise to their level of incompetence, because there were a whole host of youngsters doing it twice as fast as me. But, you know, that's an example of change where we saw a whole new demographic emerge. We thought our target audience was a wealthy female around 33 years up of age, and we realised there's all these oldies like me, 55 and up, were starting to get concerned about going out, so they were buying online. And then there was this whole group of people interested in halal products and products with attributes which they could guarantee they were going to get from us. So we found all these segments from the way our sales grew during the COVID shutdown. And in fact, we bought a bone broth business because we saw a new dimension coming through, and we're adding that to the mix. So it changed our way of looking at customers, and we saw them less as a group of hungry, commodity-driven carnivores, and more inclined to be a group of discerning, specific attribute-driven consumers. So exactly. It was probably quite a healthy outcome for us in some ways.
I would say so. How does the R&D work at Giltrap?
Oh, look, it's a huge part of our business. We're nothing like the scale of Gallagher, of course, but we've got probably 8 or 10% of our total business is directed full-time at R&D or development projects and things like that. So, yeah, I just don't think you can live forever on what you designed 10 years ago, you know. No. And the market demographic is changing all the time. So about half of our business is overseas, and more the people that are buying our products are 20 or 30 years younger than me. and they're used to doing everything with a finger, touch of a button. And so, like it or not, our products have now got to incorporate systems like that, you know, where it kind of becomes second nature for them to use a screen to operate a machine as opposed to a whole lot of levers and things like that. So that's the way our business is kind of evolving, and we're bringing more and more of that technological change into our product.
With a lot of that business overseas, is that manufactured overseas, or do you manufacture things here and then it's shipped overseas?
No, we manufacture everything in New Zealand, so 100%. So we've got two factories actually. We've got a factory in Otahonga, yes we do, yeah. And a couple of years ago we bought Duncan Ag in Timaru, which is a seed drill company.
It's the Otahonga of the South Island.
That's the one. Yeah, so that's great. So, you know, we're building product out of both of those sites, and we're exporting to about 10 countries.
How do you stay competitive? Because I guess you've got some very, very big rivals overseas.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, I guess the strength of our business is looking for opportunities that the really big guys maybe aren't interested in. You know, niche type products, or the strength of our business, I guess, is around pastoral farming systems, which, you know, New Zealand is renowned for pastoral farming systems. And really high quality food production. And so our business kind of follows that. So wherever there's a pastoral farming system in the world, that we try and be in that place too.
Mark, how does Gallagher's stay competitive?
The vast majority of our manufacture, as you know, is done in New Zealand and on a few sites, and Hamilton's our biggest. And we try and stay world class at whatever we do. So we've got an awesome moulding shop there. And we've got state-of-the-art electronics manufacture. It's like I was lucky enough to go to SpaceX one time, and it was real cool. But what it did make me realise was that our shop's cool too, and it's like going to SpaceX when you go and see those robots picking up and making things happen. And you'll see in this shot on the screen right now, this is our new plant for making the ring top standards I was mentioning before, the future in portable posts. And so there's a couple of robots there that are passing pieces of metal into a moulding machine, moulding on the head, and then another robot picks it out and puts it onto another machine and moulds on the foot, and then it's presented to the operator. So yeah, by investing in technology, we can remain world class and make products, you know, top quality products in New Zealand.
Do we undersell the sexiness of ag tech in this country when it comes to innovation? You know, kids think, oh, I've got to go and do something. It might be space technology or the America's Cup, but actually we've seen technologies from all of those areas now heading into that ag sector, and likewise technologies from the ag sector heading back out to those places.
Do we undersell it? Possibly we do, yeah. When we have farmers come through our plant, they're invariably blown away by the care and attention and detail and all the technologies that are used to build the products that they interact with. So yeah, we probably do. Yeah, I'm not sure what the answer is to that though, to be honest.
Tony, tell me about the state of technology in some of your plants. How do you stay competitive with those large overseas, you know, meat businesses?
Well, you're right about large. You know, we're medium-sized, I guess, but the number one rule is if you have a good year, don't try and buy another meat company, because you're bound to stuff it up if you do. So
I'll make a note of that.
I think staying focused. We're in the deconstruction business. If you think what Mark just described and the footage we saw was a construction business, you know, he's putting together products to sell into a world market. We're actually taking a value chain and deconstructing what farmers have created into valuable products from a cattle beast, and we're then delivering that to a discerning customer somewhere in the world. So the innovation for us is to do that, firstly, very efficiently, but secondly, to do it with real panache, you know, so that we dot our I's, we cross our T's, that the customer gets what they ordered on time, and that the attributes within the product or its packaging are right up to scratch. Shelf life is perfect. We do all the small things well, and if you talk to consumers in places like China, they differentiate us to other countries on some of those basic attributes, doing the small things well. But then there's the bigger stuff, and that is creating the point of difference for New Zealand as a whole. And I think what we're finding as an industry is that innovation is fine at a company level, but we've got to start innovating more at an industry level. We've got to start working perhaps more collaboratively. to understand market segments and to realise our real competitors are offshore. And I think, the gill trap example there of finding the niche, our whole meat industry fits within a niche when you look at it in global terms. So the struggle for us is to do that successfully as an industry and maintain a competitive model for farmers in the process. And I think we're getting better at it. Some of the big egos have gone, and some of the opportunities are becoming more apparent, and particularly in and around emerging markets in Asia.
Do you think that's part of our competitive advantage, is the fact that we have reasonably large companies, but we are a very small country? People know people, we have all bumped into each other, you see each other at functions, and that ability to chat and share the knowledge, and you discovering that something that Gallagher's or Gill Trap is doing may be of interest to what Greenlee's doing, and vice versa.
Absolutely. We've learned an enormous amount from Gallagher's, in terms of setting up the Greenlee Foundation. That was predicated on some really cool stuff they were doing in the community. And, whether it's that sort of thing or whether it's around product development or just comparing notes on how you approach things like health and safety, Kiwis are quite good at helping each other. And I think the more we do it, the more we realise we get from the exercise as well. Mark Harris and I have been having a competition, T-Radar, you might be interested to know. In preparation for the show, we both wrote a poem.
Yes, I've seen some of your poems, Tony.
and that Kiwi sense of humour, I think, is something that we enjoy as well. And I think we have each other on, we meet at functions, but we also have a bit of a laugh with each other. And I think that's all part of keeping innovation alive as well. When you don't take yourself too seriously, you have a go at things. And I've
definitely heard that from, overseas markets in tech and various things. They come over here to our functions and our award nights, and they can't believe the sort of the casual or semi-casual formality. There still remains, even within business, a sort of a sense of, I suppose, egalitarianism between the top and the bottom. And that's part of our competitive difference, I would suspect, as well, Mark.
Yeah, I guess so. When you visit Gallagher, you're quite likely to run into Sir William at the lunchroom, and he associates with all of the staff, and so we're very flat, I suppose you could say, and we all get on very well and are quite keen to help one another. We've got a bit of an association going in Chile, for example.
We do, yeah.
What are you doing over there?
Yeah, so look, Gallagher were already in Chile trying to get a business up and running, and we were pretty keen to do something as well. We knew it was a space that we wanted to be in, but I think both of us realised pretty quickly that we weren't going to survive on our own. So it's just a case of pooling, a bit of NZ Inc. and working together. Even though we didn't even have similar products, we were kind of working on the basis of taking the New Zealand farming system to the world. And so we pooled our resources and our products, and we've got a pretty good business going between us over there now. So it's great.
When you're over there and you're going into that competitive market, how much do you wave the New Zealand flag? How important is that?
Oh, I think it's hugely important. I think New Zealand, like I said before, I think New Zealand is recognised in the world as one of the benchmarks for, for farming execution and farming knowledge. And it doesn't apply to every market in the world. The Americans farm differently than the Kiwis. But like I said, we're sort of keen to follow that New Zealand style of farming around the world. And so if that's what you're chasing, you absolutely wave that New Zealand flag.
Mark, how is it important for you? Because I guess you're dealing in a very competitive market across all of the levels that Gallagher works at. That's
right. Depending on the market, depends on the relevance of that flag. So just like Craig was saying, when we're talking to pastoral farmers offshore, New Zealand farmers are known as the world's leading pastoralists. Our genetics, our grass genetics, our equipment that we use to support that grazing sector. So that's where the New Zealand sort of ness of what we're doing is really, really important. Then when you get into the hobby sector, or we're keeping bears out of beehives or whatever we're doing, that's when it becomes less. So we tend to be offshore where we're local, and we use that New Zealand origin and New Zealand story, to the right segment. Yeah.
How many bears are required to be kept out of beehives? Like, clearly enough to fund a part of the business.
One of the beautiful things about the modern world is that we no longer shoot lots of things all the time, and so we've got a massive resurgence of wild pigs, bears, you'll have seen the bears on TV getting in, into places where they shouldn't be.
Yeah, I've tramped through areas where there are bears.
It's an electric...
uncomfortable.
Yeah, it is. It's an electric fence manufacturer's dream.
Yeah.
Because we can protect people from these animals and protect the animals from getting in trouble.
Actually, more importantly, protect the poor old animals from the people.
Yeah.
We're talking about all these kind of New Zealand things, and one of the things that we always think about is that number 8 wire mentality, and there's been arguments for and against the sort of success of that. How do you foster that when you've got people coming to you for, I guess, with ideas, and I've given people awards for some very good ideas just last year. How does that work?
Well, we've always been open to, we don't have all the good ideas ourselves, so we've always been open to having ideas come to us. And one good example was Murray Jones from Gisborne, who came to us with an idea for a water flow detector or a visual flow indicator to so that farmers could look inside their pipes and see where the water's going, because a lot of farmers will have missed dinner dates because they've got a water problem, and so it can become quite stressful. So we got into business with Murray and helped him develop the product and launched it for him, and that's been very successful. So yeah, we're quite open to working with others.
Because the great thing now, all the little tools, the Internet of Things, all of these things are all just designed to make life just a bit easier. What's the most stunning little bit of innovation, perhaps, that someone has brought to you or that you've gone out and found recently and thought, crikey, that's going to be a game changer?
Crikey, that's a hard question.
It's a hard question. You think about this, Tony, because I'm going to come and ask you the same thing very soon.
I think probably one of the things, it's hard to pinpoint any one thing, right? But probably having a product where you could take the feeding machine out to a paddock and it won't let you feed in the wrong paddock.
That's great.
Yep.
Because we've all, I'm not going to say that we employ those people, because often some of us have been employed and we've been that person who has probably gone and fed out in the wrong paddock.
Correct.
But all of these things, and we were talking about this earlier on, before we came on, that ability, you quite often have people coming in and out, contractors or whatever it may be, and now if we combine it with all of the data, the maps, the graphs, you could program in that these machines cannot spread any slurry, for example, anywhere in this area. They can't feed out in this area. You could have, I guess, some water meters to say, look, this ground is a bit too wet for feeding out on today, and that all is programmed into what is ostensibly still just a feed-out machine.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Tony, what surprised you? Something recently that, where you've gone, gosh, didn't expect that. Bit of number 8 wire innovation.
Well, I think one of the key examples for our business would be the First Light Wagyu relationship we have, where we do their processing for them, and they have a very high specification, and took a lot of work for our team to get their heads around initially how to service that more complex business. But we've done it over the years, and we've now started working more collectively in how we sell products together and help each other's strengths, for instance, and added value products like minced, diced, sliced products. All of that innovation is constantly testing the status quo and trying to take the core meat business forward. But where we've moved in recent times is into areas like food. I mentioned bone broth. We bought a small business and we're currently scaling it into a pretty big business. Our target's to produce more than 61,000 litres of bone broth next year. So, that to me is where you look at what you're doing and whether you use science or you use connections that you already have, or you use collaboration like I mentioned with First Light, and you try and take your business to another level incrementally. We don't do it all in one day. We do it each day in different ways. And one of the great attributes of being medium-sized, I guess, is that we can try those angles without having a lot of bureaucracy in the way, and we can fast fail where we need to. So that's one area. And to radar, I think the other area would be in the areas of solving problems for the industry. You mentioned sustainability in a broad sense there just before. For us as an industry, we have to get the value chain right. We have to get the environment, the number 8 wire, so-called, has to be in the right place and allow for trees and everything else. And climate change has to allow for methane management. So we need to be innovative and we need to work together at an industry level. And I think Beef and Lamb New Zealand has shown some real leadership. And I'm not just saying that because I'm on their board, but I think Terry Cooney was on just before on the show prior to this, and listening to him talk about the industry with such passion. So I think industry associations, the Primary Sector Council showed me that there's a huge amount of coming together in terms of what New Zealand needs to do to be sustainable for the future. And whether it's through Maori principles like Te Tao, or just Maori wisdom. These are things that we weren't as focused on 5 years ago, but now are becoming core drivers in our innovative mindset. And I think it's really cool being in a country that's starting to embrace the problems of the world in such a positive way.
Absolutely, and we're seeing that, I guess, through the likes of the work that you do. Gallagher's, you've got your fencing, you've got some work, I think, around fenceless farming.
We do.
You do. You know, that ability you don't have to spend millions of dollars on fencing waterways. You can put in some clever tech and keep animals away from that, and then actually increase those borders depending on the weather conditions backwards. And likewise with your spreaders, that ability to know exactly what's going on, to catalogue it, to have it in a system so that people know what's gone on, when, was it the right time or not.
And keep it out of the places it's not supposed to be.
That's exactly right. Very quickly, we'll wrap it up. Biggest challenge for you in the future?
Probably keeping up with the pace of change, actually. I think just keep a real steady focus on R&D and make sure that you try and stay in front of it.
Mark?
We're rapidly moving into the digital sort of world. You know, everything's becoming digital, and I guess just finding the right people to help us move there fast enough.
Marvellous. And Tony, what would it be for you just figuring out how to make the right bone broth to go on my halloumi patty?
Yeah, and I seem to start shaking a bit more these days, so all this new technology gets harder and harder to use, particularly trying to press the right button at the right time and not end up somewhere else, and and trying to give these youngsters a go. It's probably the big challenge for me. That's
right. And having all of those youngsters also realise the fact that actually some of the best decisions, that sort of wry old farmer who stands there and says, we tried that a few years ago and it didn't work, and taking up on that advice and innovation as well. Gentlemen, thank you very much. Thank you, Tony. Thank you, Mark and Craig. Feels good to have the future of agribusiness in such capable hands, with so much support for Kiwi innovation and so many smart ideas right here in New Zealand. We should, of course, I think, be celebrating that more.